you, Mr. Chairman, and again I welcome our witnesses and thank them for their efforts, their tremendous efforts to date in containing the virus. And can I ask if there have been any particular lessons learned from the spike in Kildare and the adjoining counties? For example, in early detection, in the sources of the virus, have they been all identified sufficiently in order to be able to react rapidly in the event of a recurrence? That's the first question. And the second question, given the obvious opening of the schools, are you satisfied that adequate measures are in place to deal with any matters arising in the event of there being an upsurge in any particular location or in general? And the last question, Mr. Chairman, is in relation to the country at large. For example, there was a huge surge in Kildare between the first and the second week of the Kildare and immediate area lockdown, a very worrying surge. Has the possibility of that been identified, the causes identified, and have measures been put in place or are likely to be put in place to be able to deal with that? Any similar repetition nationwide? Thank you.
So,
Dr. Glenn?
Might let Professor Nolan take this first, if that's okay?
Okay.
So I think it's fair to say that important lessons have been learned. The two lessons that have been learned is that if we react quickly, we can bring the disease back under control. That's what the Kildare, Laois and Offaly outbreaks show. The second thing they show is if you have a very large outbreak, the risk of diffusion into households and communities is higher than if you have smaller outbreaks. So there was a greater volume of cases and a greater spread into household settings in Kildare than there was in Laois and Offaly. And I think to an earlier question, this could have happened in any county in the country. Most counties in the country have the kind of workplace settings that are capable of amplifying this disease, and in detail quite a lot has been learned within those settings. For the reasons Dr. Lynn has alluded to earlier, I think in terms of the reopening of schools, there is a level of assurance here. It is very unlikely that if a child were to bring the disease into a school, that they will spread it to another child, and unlikely again that that child will bring it home and spread it back into their own home. I think we need to remember here that what is much more likely is that adults moving around in society, in workplaces and in other settings, are more likely to transmit it between households through adult-to-adult transmission. So in no way is it an experiment. It's a carefully judged prioritisation of what we need to get back to, having done a very detailed risk assessment. And then just a final thing on the on data and what we've learned. An individual case may be indexed to a particular address. You know, it may be the home address or the work address of the people. But people move around. They live in one place, they work in another. They have family and extended family quite widely distributed. So even though we may be seeing 2 or 3 or 4 cases in a given electoral district, they're connected, and the pattern of this disease was really quite diffuse across Kildare and spreading in across the borders into the neighbouring counties. So an electoral district map tells you something. It tells you one location that each case is associated with, but the reality is each case is associated with multiple locations, and we do most of what we do within our counties. So that wouldn't reveal the much wider influence of the disease within a given county.
Thank you.
Another minute.
Another minute. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can I mention just in particular the NAFET and their tremendous work so far, and wish them well in their efforts. Naturally, Professor Nolan, we have a special interest in the situation in Kildare because of the location in which we reside. I would ask quite simply this, that in order to ensure that public confidence remains at a high level, can you give us an indication that the systems are in place and are adequate and ready to react quickly to any particular suspected upsurge in any area, either in schools or anywhere else, over the next
Could
few
that
days.
be maybe a very short answer, please, Professor Nolan?
I think the last few weeks have shown us that the systems are in place, and at one point at the peak there was a little bit of strain on the tracing system, but aside from that the system stood up extremely well to what was a very sudden and quite large challenge.
Thank you very much, Professor Nolan.